welcome everyone to this BJSS webinar. As part of Leeds Digital Festival, it's our UI podcast with a slight twist. We are broadcasting from Yorkshire, Euston and New York. For those of you who don't know BJSFR, we are a technology consultancy and we collaborate with our customers, helping them to deliver complex technology solutions used by millions of people every day. This session is being recorded. And we do want you to send in any of your questions using the Q&A functionality. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our UI podcast team.
Hi guys.
Welcome to the podcast. This is our first live, hopefully fairly interactive podcast. We are a group of people that have typically been doing kind of podcasts now for about the last year, internal to BJSS, just on all things UI related. So we've had them to do with tech, JavaScript. We had Similian, whose talk you may have seen the other day, kind of coming on to talk about imposter syndrome. And today, for Leeds Digital Fest, coronavirus keeping us all inside, we're doing our first one with 3 different kind of offices across 2 different countries. So you've got myself and Joanna, who are both in the States, and Joe Thornton and Josh Bates, who are in the UK. So for those of you that don't know, my name's Daniel Wright. I'm typically a front-end developer here at BJSS. I'll let everybody else kind of introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Joe Thornton. I'm a UI developer based in Leeds. I'm the UI capability lead for Leeds, and yeah, mainly front end, lots of full stack kind of dev. Go for it, Josh.
All right, I'll go. Yep, it's a bit awkward, that, isn't it? My name is Joshua Bates. I am a software engineer, predominantly front end engineer, looking to all things JavaScript. I've led a few projects here and there, so a bit of full stack in there as well, as and when we can.
And I'm other Joe. I was in Leeds and have worked and lived in New York for the last 6 months. I'm traditionally more server-side development. In fact, quite vocally avoid UI stuff a lot of the time, as I'm not very good at it. And I now live sort of outside of Manhattan doing foreign exchange trading in New York.
So that tie-in there from Joe kind of ties quite nicely into the fact that this is a bit of a rogue one for us. We're not going to be typically just dealing with UI topics. What we wanted to really deal with in this one was the fact that we're now all having previously stayed and worked in Leeds, or started kind of our career with BJSS in Leeds, and now working across the globe in different places. We've all worked with across the globe, and we're now looking to, hello Ali. Kind of,
was our boss just checking in on us, making sure that everything's running smoothly?
Well, okay, yeah, great. That's about as broke as they normally get. So yeah, so we thought this time, what with coronavirus keeping us all inside, we talk about how basically we're coping with working remotely, working internationally, what kind of new things have kind of been expected of us, what's it like working for an international kind of business that kind of is expecting you to just be able to dip in, not just in projects, but into kind of things working across time zones and everything else that's kind of going along.
Yeah, and the thing which interests me talking to these guys is the different working cultures as well, because it's as things get increasingly global and as increasingly people just become a face on a screen, you lose track of the fact that people are working in different local environments, and I think that it impacts not only the working day but more broadly the technology choices that they're making, kind of projects they work on and all that kind of thing. So should be good.
So this is something that we've all kind of experienced even when we were based in Leeds, having worked kind of for multicultural teams, if you will, or teams already situated internationally. So I think we've all been on projects where we've worked with teams in India, Canada, China, these kind of things. And Joe has been recently working on a team before we went to America, working with people in New York. So how do you all kind of get around time zone differences? Let's kick that one off. How does that help?
Yeah, I can probably speak to that. So my current project is, I think we have four or five time zones. So we had a foreign exchange venue in Brazil that we were integrating with. So we had a time zone there to speak to them. You've got New York Times Square team that is what I'm part of. Then we've got UK members and then members in Bangkok that do production. or production support, which is quite typical sort of setup for the finance company I work for. And the biggest change to my day was, which Corona almost helped with the lockdown, was a bit of shifting of when you could have meetings to support this. So we'd quite often have a problem with our integration that we'd hand off from Brazil. We'd then hand that off to ourselves, investigate it. Then we'd hand it over to Bangkok, and the time zone difference from Bangkok to us is about 12 hours. And then from Brazil to us, I think it's about 4 hours the other way. So inside a single day, you've got these handoff points constantly happening where you're trying to work out what your bug was, hand it over to Bangkok to test it. They then obviously feed back on the details, and you'd spend all your evenings at sort of 10 p.m. New York time would become 10 a.m. Bangkok time. And then you'd also need to be 4 hours behind that as well to speak to Brazil. So you end up with this fluid chain of you trying to dip into your day at different points to try and be nice to everyone else. And everyone's sort of taking it in turns of getting up at absurd times to try and have this 20-minute call where you've got to get out of bed or stay in bed. Being in New York, quite famous for eating cheesecake in bed late at night on these calls. So you get New York cheesecake in bed, 10 p.m., trying to turn on to Bangkok, just waking up to tell them about your critical bug you've tried to fix all day. So a lot of the lockdown has sort of made that go out of the window as well. So you have no concept of beginning or end of days now.
You almost have a support rotor for how you're going to talk to people within other time zones, effectively.
Yeah, we really struggled at the beginning because the product we support as well has some legacy aspects to it. So, for instance, like a lot of configurations held on the database, and a lot of things becoming reproducible will rely on that configuration. So when you get someone to report a bug to you, at the beginning, we found it really difficult with the time zone. If you didn't get all the information about how to reproduce it at that initial conversation, you're having to wait 12 hours. And when we had sort of deadlines of like 2 weeks' time, this needs to be live for this bank, obviously a day or two becomes a big issue. So we really struggled to start with making sure those calls didn't end. You know, it gets to 11 p.m. midnight, you need to still make sure that you get enough information to unblock everyone for the next day. So we got very, very efficient at our sort of JIRA process. Been able to add, you know, like you need a database backup to raise a bug ticket, you need a description, we'll also have a 20-minute call, and only after that is the bug actually available to be picked up. And the second we sort of introduce those constraints, we realize we're actually wasting a lot less time at very awkward parts of the day, which was nice.
It's funny you should say that, actually. I'm just wondering there. We obviously worked in a financial institute, and you know, handing off of data between people is something that is quite hard to get people into the rhythm of. So how did that change, I suppose? How did that change the end of the day for you? I suppose you just had to unload everything that you knew of onto a ticket before you left for the day.
Yeah, what really did help as well is you start focusing on a lot different areas of sort of technology in terms of the product. So our product had a configurable database that before we had these time zone issues, it was sort of expected as a working procedure that production would configure their product, you'd configure yours, and you know, everyone's kind of in sync, which, you know, is an old school way of doing things. But it certainly got to a point where that wasn't good enough. You know, the amount of bugs that were being raised and sort of having to be sort of brought back into that release cycle meant that we needed something quick to guarantee our environment was the same as QA. So all of a sudden, tickets that we may not have picked up for a while, like automating the deployment of a database based on, let's say, a YAML file, or something that says, you know, I want these users and these venues connected in this way, that would have never really been picked up in the old world. But now we're all in different time zones where that handoff was costing us days at a time. All of a sudden, those sort of low-hanging fruit tickets became sort of top of the priority list. And now actually for our next phase delivery, when we go to the cloud, they become core to our deployment process. So it's quite interesting how for us at least, the different time zones caused us to sort of realize and benefit from a different subsection of work than we ever would have.
Yeah, it's interesting because you've almost realigned your priorities kind of as to what you were doing to start with. Whereas if we were a UK-based team, that wouldn't take so much time to be kind of all asking each other these questions. So you won't necessarily kind of work on maturing that kind of soft skill side of kind of getting information, that kind of communication. Whereas in this case, it sounds like that has really become quite a prevalent kind of thing, just understanding how to talk to people kind of efficiently to get them kind of the best out of the data and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when I worked in the UK, I worked on projects that had sort of multiple teams across the UK, but never had to have that level of like empathy for other people, of somebody is getting up at 6 a.m. in their time to talk to you because they want to do their job well that next day. And there's language barriers and other issues as well, but you sort of just foster this ability to understand that, everyone's in a tough situation and you all just want it to work.
Well, this was the next thing I was going to ask then, kind of bearing in mind, obviously, you're not seeing these people. You might get a video chat room. How do you avoid kind of this idea, kind of just throwing it over the fence? I know as developers, we kind of have that kind of stigmatism already when it comes to testing, and you just like throw it over the fence to the testers. How do you avoid doing that then when it becomes kind of another international team that isn't necessarily a BJS team as either? So it's like,
I think, to be honest, like the main thing we do is quite often join a call 10 minutes before any management gets there. And that gives you a way of having at least 10 minutes of slagging off your own deadlines, their deadlines. Everyone can get a bit of like stress out to each other, which sort of humanizes you, because they're going to be given a ridiculous deadline, which is why they're making you get up at 5 a.m. so that they can fix things into their evening.
I've noticed
10 minutes.
I've noticed that for meetings just happening even in the UK now that everyone's on Zoom calls and things. You just need that space to just have 5 minutes of human chat about whatever, just to personalize the people that you're talking against. Otherwise, you become just another line in a Jira ticket or something. So has anyone looked at, because we get this problem again and again with international teams of kind of the silos and things, and in our wonderful ideal agile nirvana, we'd all be doing sort of cross-functional teams that are co-located and that kind of thing. Had there been any talk of, say, shifting some QA over to where you are and maybe some dev over to Bangkok?
In terms of the Bangkok side, probably not. That's very traditional the way they do it. But in terms of dev, we have a UK team which is BGSS and sort of New York team which is BGSS and client. And we have found that if we bring the New York team, actually bring them over once, I think the two other guys in the New York team, they sort of come over from the UK once every month or two for a week. And although they're only here for a week, again, that brings that cycle of, it helps all the other 3 weeks of co-location, because you get, like, if they're owning a set of stories or they're like taking point on how we're architecting a certain area, it does give you that feedback loop of, as they come over, they're able to, all do all the good things of chatting in person, and then when they go back, you're sort of at a level playing field to help facilitate all those like harder off-site calls. I've not been able to get a trip over to Bangkok yet, though, out of it. I was hoping at some point, but not yet.
No one's getting any trips anywhere at the moment. Don't worry about it. So we've got a question from Smillion of this parish, saying, with all the time zones, language barriers, and other difficulties, do you find, in the context of remote work, that your productivity has dropped? Or do you think it's similar? Or are you even more efficient? No one could be more efficient than you, Joe, but
I would still say productivity has dropped. I'm personally a firm believer of, if you're sat together with a small team, you're likely to do a lot more than sort of 3 or 4 teams separated out for the general communication and be able to make decisions, that kind of thing. It's obviously easier to turn around next to the guy next to you and say, I'm going to make this change. Can you make it on your service? There's no waste there in terms of communication. Having said that, whether you would do as good a job with that productivity, I generally think we document things better now. Our project manager, Debbie, she's fantastic. She does loads of she's taken time to sort of create more fostering and sort of casual chats to help us, like I say, understand other parts of the team. That really brings a more productive way to your bit of work. So I think you probably waste a lot more time during the day, but in the time that's not wasted, you do produce more. So it might level out. I don't know. That's probably my most political answer, but yeah, I'm not quite sure otherwise.
You've just mentioned a good point there about, it is about productivity and working from home and everyone all dipping in, but even people working internationally, I mean, coronavirus is hit. Do you find that people are, or even yourself, this is going to be head on the line situation, but do you find yourself a little bit less productive working from home with coronavirus, or?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're in New York. It's pretty bad where we are at the minute. Like I say, luckily we've not heard any sirens on this call, but yesterday we had a call where there's just sirens constantly. Like, that's quite normal to hear across New York. And that does obviously affect your concentration a bit. Like, there is that, you have that background worry of, are you going to get ill, or the other nasty stuff of, if I do get ill, can I actually go to hospital? I'm not going to talk about the American healthcare system, but thank God the NHS is available in the UK. So without that, obviously that adds to your growing complexity over here. But yeah, I'd
So
definitely say that.
how did you find before the impending apocalypse? How did you find that transition from working in Leeds to working in New York? Was it? I mean, a lot of our work is literally showing at a small screen. So, but beyond that, what was like the culture shift like?
Like I said, I found actually the location, like I worked directly in Times Square, so like the amount of people compared to Leeds is just crazy, and as many have worked with me don't deal with people all that well, so having like thousands of people walking around you all the time is different to Leeds. It's very different. In terms of the actual work, it's quite similar. The people I work with, however, I found that the culture shift from like UK to America. The Americans I worked with, whether that's a New York thing, they're a lot more direct than the UK. So like the first few meetings you have, you thought they were being really rude to you. They weren't. They were just telling you what they wanted and in the way they do. But that initial week or two, I kept wondering, like, what on earth am I doing wrong? Like, what more did you want? I'd done the task you asked for, but the way that they just, the way they present themselves, and after a few weeks, you realise that they are just being direct because that's how they are. But that culture shift was definitely something to like nip in the bud quickly and just sort of hold back any what you call defensive responses to anything. You sort of just let yourself sink into that culture and realise actually they say good things and bad things the same way. They're just very direct and very towards you. So that was probably the biggest shock.
That's the general language barrier for most places, though. I know when we've worked with kind of teams in other countries, that language barrier can sometimes be, in this case, it's just like a kind of a cultural barrier. But these kind of things can be a bit of a hindrance to kind of getting in there, especially when it comes to kind of filtering out requirements, or as you say, kind of making you feel like you should be doing more if someone's a little bit kind of too direct with what you're saying.
Yeah, how have you found it in Texas?
Well, I've seen the inside of an apartment building so far in Texas. Yeah, so obviously one of the great things of working for an international company is that occasionally you get to go and work internationally. So having just moved to Houston, Texas, 2 weeks before the coronavirus really stopped everything, I've seen very little of anything apart from the inside of a building. So my input on what working here is like is going to be limited. It's interesting though to kind of see that, having spoken to some people and gone to some kind of like meetups and things, kind of the idea of what we in the UK would say is a standard technology stack, say kind of JavaScript and a kind of a typical React Vue Angular framework or something like that, still out here seems to be very much kind of, up and coming. So it's quite .NET-ish kind of still around here. So I went to a UI kind of session here and it was all in .NET. It was just like, and apparently, what they're looking for is .NET developers, and it's very kind of, rarely kind of, I've been doing a lot of CV reviewing and things, and a lot of them they'll have a bit of kind of React and stuff on it, but it's just not the same kind of CV that you would expect kind of to be getting in the UK, which is quite...
Microsoft we trust.
Yeah.
What does it feel like using a proper language again?
Oh, well, JavaScript, yeah, good.
He's on the wrong call for this, isn't he?
Yes.
Right on that TypeScript nonsense soon, but anyway.
Oh, don't start me on TypeScript. We'll be here all day. But yeah, it's interesting to see, and hopefully, certainly I've been to kind of have a couple of chats with people from some of the oil and gas companies that kind of we work with here, and even in there, they're kind of looking at kind of updating technology stacks. I think one person said to me the other day that Vue was a bit too of an extreme framework for kind of the shift that they were trying to make, but they were looking to use React, and that was as far as they'd go. So it's interesting, and say, yeah, Azure seems to be quite popular.
You just repeat that again for me. They think Vue is too extreme, but React isn't.
Well, in the conversation, it went basically, we're looking to use React and have component libraries and all of these kind of things, but maybe not Vue because it's too much of a shift for a lot of people. So, I personally agree with. If you're going to write everything in one file again, that is too much of a shift for most people nowadays anyway. So,
and if you look at the usage stats, Vue is still pretty niche. It's the thing which developers like to talk about and use, but then real people get involved and say, no, we've not heard of that.
Then we should promote Mythron as another one to go.
Well, I liked Vue.
Just throw that in there.
You don't like it. If you like it, Dan, I won't like it. That's the way it works.
Okay, right. Well, view's safe then.
So what I'm getting is the culture in Houston, from what you've seen of it from your four small walls, is lots of .NET, and I guess is it all oil and gas out there? That's mainly what our clients are, aren't they?
Oil and gas is our clients. So yeah, I suppose at the moment Houston's quite a small kind of side of things at the moment. So we've got a couple of contractors and I think I was the first dev, and we've got a BA kind of sitting out here as well with us. So Houston in itself is quite small, and our main client is oil and gas. But I'm guessing we'll be looking to kind of expand that, really. I mean,
so
sounds
you mentioned contractors. My kind of preconceived notion was that contractors weren't really a thing in the US due to the way that sort of health and taxes put together. But I guess you do come across them then.
Yeah, there are some. I say so. Certainly, the one kind of that I've interacted with, very good. Used to run his own company, so now is kind of contracted, and it's a great way for kind of us to kind of start and get a name up and on the ground. But then, yeah, I have heard some kind of horror stories about contractors just not wanting to ever work, from an office, and kind of thinking part of being a contractor so they can work remotely every day. And
who do that? That'd be crazy.
Well, apparently this is a commonly requested thing, is this idea that they won't go into an office. So there are some kind of little things out here, but yeah, you do see a lot. You do still see a few kind of contractors. But I think certainly for Houston-wise, we're trying to shift away to a more kind of a permanent role. I think contractors were here to kind of get us in and turning things over, but now we're looking at doing more permanent stuff. So, yeah.
We've got another question in the chat. So Smillian again. Have you ever had a project spanning internationally with multiple teams that was running smoothly in a way that you can if there was just one team in one location?
Have we ever had a project that's run fully smoothly, for starters? I don't know if such a thing exists, but certainly in terms of as smooth as we can, I think we've had. I mean, certainly I've been on one or two where you've had sort of offshore teams working, and you do get to that kind of performing stage where everyone understands what their roles are and moves forward. But it has got to be constantly. You've got to constantly grease those wheels, haven't you? With it, like you say, that if you can get people to have trips over to see one another and get the human faces there and that kind of thing, that stuff's invaluable.
I think it's that whole mature working kind of team, effectively, which kind of, as Joe was saying earlier, kind of takes a bit of time to kind of, you've got to understand your priorities and understand. So even in some teams where we've been in the UK, just having a group of 8-10 people kind of all sitting working on a project can sometimes take a bit of time before everybody's kind of actually kind of understanding what they're doing, understanding how to speak to each other. So yeah, I suppose it does take a bit more time with international stuff. So
the only thing I've never seen work properly is remote retros. Because there's something about retrospectives which you actually want people to be sat around in the same place and get on with it. And when you do a remote retro, it just seems like
BAs want them to last all day. It's the BA time to shine, so it's got to take all day. And I mean, 1 hour, just be done. Let's all go. Yeah, sorry, BAs.
No worries, dear. Thank you for joining us. That's been the I guess the whistle stop tour. So as you can work out, Dan's just stuck in 4 walls. You may as well just be in Doncaster.
Well, it's strange you say that, because I've come from Leeds to Houston to continue working with the Leeds teams back in Leeds on Leeds-based kind of projects. So I may as well have just not left. But to be honest, it's warmer here in Houston. I can go for a run a lot, and it's a lot nicer, kind of, really. So, has its benefits, but I'm just hot all the time.
Oh, always, Dan. So we've got another question from a D McCarthy, that's the one, sorry, saying that they're a delivery leader who's managed many global teams and implemented a lot of change. What's the biggest team challenge that each of you have experienced?
Team change.
Team change, is that change of team or change within the team? So team change, sorry, I see, I'm misreading the question and you're correct. I stand corrected.
That's okay. I think the biggest shift in team that at least we have on this current project is we are bringing the client has brought in another third-party provider that we'll be handing over to in sort of a year and a half once the development's stable, but they're getting involved now. But they're in Russia, I think, Russia or Eastern Europe basically, with a contract, and that massive shift of having Bangkok to hand off to having Russia and having the UK, that's definitely put a lot of strain on the performance of the team, because as with sort of onboarding anyone, there's a lot of impact, especially on the senior engineers, to try and get that knowledge over to make them productive as quickly as you can at your own cost. And I think whenever I've worked on projects that have scaled too quickly or had too big a shift like that, is usually because they want to really deliver something quickly, and quite often the immediate answer is to throw people or money at the problem, rightly or wrongly, and that actually hinders the delivery deadlines of what your immediate delivery deadlines anyway. So I think that line of especially mixing remote work with sort of big team shifts like that has definitely hindered delivery. Not necessarily on this project, but on previous ones I've worked for, it was definitely a big factor in meeting or not meeting deadlines.
Yeah, I found when we've sort of worked the projects that which I think most of us worked on for a bank where we're trying to bring new countries online, and they had their whole sort of IT teams and stakeholders and that kind of thing, and just trying to align, say, the Chinese expectations on basic terminology and what constitutes a tranche of work and estimation, all that kind of thing. It takes time to just even start speaking the same language, and you get there eventually, and you sort of go and meet one another and blatantly don't understand one another, so start again and try again and go around that circle a few times, and it gets better. But that kind of shifting to just whole new cultures and bring them into an established team is hard work.
Yeah, for me, kind of, apart from the obviously the physical aspect of having people in, it's the ownership of products when you're working with multiple teams. It's like quite often you'll see kind of like one set of people own a certain subset of the infrastructure, and it's like, well, they're the team that you have to speak to, and it's like, well, those guys have their own idea of how that should be implemented and done. But when I'm trying to interact with them, then it's like, actually now I have my idea of how it should be done. I think this idea of almost in a way product ownership, and then say certainly with legacy products, it's like actually we're just kind of holding on to this till someone kind of rewrite it, but it lives over in India, and you're just like, well, if they're just holding on to it, how are we supposed to kind of work out getting changes and all the rest of it to it? So quite often I think kind of product or kind of service ownership of just like parts of technology stacks can be quite fraught in siloing knowledge, if you will. So you get this kind of siloed knowledge, and especially if it's in a different time zone or in a different kind of language area, and it's just like, well, then you have to go and find someone in there who actually knows about it. So that can be quite tricky.
Yeah, I mean, to also speak to that, to be on the other end of that, we recently on our project, we had to bring back alive a old school venue simulator, something that would simulate a foreign exchange venue, to allow some testing to happen. We're not testing it with this, but our product needs to talk to this venue. And in the company, the entire financial company we work for, there's one person left that worked on that product. Now he has his own responsibilities now. I think he might even be a team lead for a different team delivering something. But all of a sudden our manager is also his manager, or that team's manager oversees that, looks over that other team. So his day-to-day life has gone from not just being responsible for whatever he delivered, but now he's got me and a bunch of other naive devs coming to him, looking at a code base he's clearly not worked on for like 4 or 5 years, maybe longer, and just being like, there's no documentation, how do I run this? And you can just see the look on his face of like sheer distraught of just, how do you run this? I can't remember any of that. And you can just see like the impact on his team will be colossal from us just being, well, we've got our own thing. We've got to somehow meet in the middle and understand some of what this product does, and also bring on that learning curve.
That really resonates with a change that I've experienced recently. So not so much a team changing, but me changing teams. So coronavirus obviously has hit recently. Unfortunately, projects have been pulled here, there, and everywhere just because of the financial, making that's happening to the market right now. So I was on a project that got canned, unfortunately, just because, parked, should I say, just because the money just wasn't there anymore. And I've moved from leading a UI project, a Vue project, to being part of a team working on a 10-year-old legacy application. So I'm working on stuff that I've not really touched before. Unfortunately, the people that made this code base aren't around. They've been furloughed, or they're just different vendors. They don't work for the provider anymore. So that's the biggest change I've been through, and it has been very difficult, and it's proven difficult based on the fact that we're all working from home, and you can't just talk to the person next to you. You've got to pester people online, and it's a bit difficult. It is a bit difficult.
I do, to cut that as well. I often find it's very demoralizing trying to solve a legacy code problem. Like, you're just trying to debug. Like, we've got some classes in our projects, like Java classes, that are 20,000 lines long. You know, they're legacy. They were written 15 years ago. You've got to now add an if statement to one of the methods without affecting anything else. It's not really a test framework. If you're in the office next to someone, you can chat loads of crap about how you're feeling constantly, about how frustrating it is that you've made no progress. You can't even get code to hit this 20,000 line class, which seems ridiculous because it's so large. Something must be executing something within this. And you sit there for hours on ends, making no progress, and you forget that you're missing that feedback loop of someone sat next to you just going, oh yeah, that is tough. Oh yeah, I managed to open that class once before. I shut it straight away. Like, don't look inside there. And that sort of joking back and forth does give you that constant morale boost that other people understand that you are now touching stuff that you really didn't want to.
I've heard of some teams have actually started just having a Zoom call or something in the background going all day as a thing to sort out. I think that'll probably drive you crazy because, people, but
it would do. The rubber duck aspect is missing entirely right now. Getting on a Slack or a Zoom call is fine, but it comes a point where it's too much doing it every 5 or 10 minutes through the day.
I just talk to Buzz Lightyear when I need to.
I think that's it. Most people just scream at the cat now, don't they? It's
going to be highly technically competent cats by the end of this. Might be the only thing stopping them taking over.
Josh, you've got kids. This seems like a good learning experience.
You know exactly what I'm going through. I've got a 7-week-old. I'm not taking this home with me. I promise.
We'll solve it for you. Make it look bad. No, I suppose it's quite an interesting one, isn't it? It's how do we deal with stuff like that? Feel free to ask any more questions because I think we've got more. Smillion again. Problem for you guys, tell you.
Do you use mob programming or pair programming to solve the problem with the rubber ducky? I think that depends on the technology and the team that you're using, because not all IDEs and things are particularly well set up for sort of doing remote working. Some are. I think if you're using Visual Studio Code or something, then you can sit through and do it together. But not everything's set up to that. And I guess not all teams work like that either. It would be a good sort of thing to aim for, though.
I think it depends as well a lot in where you are in your project life cycle. Like, if you're at the point where you are already, like before this happened and you were forced to sort of co-locate, you were already comfortable with whatever code base you had in front of you, whether you've written it or you'd adopted it or you've taken it on, you'd be in a different position to, like, I always think co-location is the hardest when you first start a project, like especially a greenfield project. Some of the best things about sat next to someone is you can just go, I found a better way of doing a build. I want to change the Jenkins pipeline like this. We need to change it across all our pipelines. Let's just do that now because we're all here and we all know the change we're making. And when you want to iterate quickly, that works really well. I can imagine if you're on a project like that, now you're co-located, that would just be absolutely painful constantly if things have to change really quickly and fundamentally. I'm not quite sure how you would handle that at all in this situation.
A blind panic and then take a deep breath and get on with it.
Sorry, me and Josh were just doing some pair programming this morning on something, and a lot of it revolves around scroll up, scroll down, scroll back to this thing. It's like if you could just take the mouse, show me what I mean, let's scroll up, scroll down, and then him writing on the screen going, look at this bit, look at it. So it's interesting. It's pair programming over something. I think we did on.
And there is tech that allow you to sort of take over the other person's mouse and that kind of thing. But you've got to really trust that person. Would you really trust Josh with your cursor? That's the question. So the other question we've got is: have you guys ever experienced a transition from a non-co-located team to co-located squads, e.g., Spotify? One thing that we have done with, or at least I have with clients is moved from that sort of siloed, the team over in in India or the States is doing their bit and you're doing your bit, or they're doing QA and you're doing the dev and that kind of thing, to try and do more full stack teams and get everybody working on the sort of the full product life cycle, but split in a different way, if you like. So rather than it being horizontally split, so that devs in Leeds, QAs in Bangkok or wherever you say, no, we're going to have a full team in Leeds doing one part of the functionality, another team in Bangkok or wherever doing another part of the functionality, and then it comes down to working out how those two parts talk to one another and making that as simple as humanly possible.
Yeah, I mean, speaking to that, I definitely think that I don't like the word DevOps, because usually people use it to mean I write Docker containers and Terraform in a separate team to the developers. But DevOps, the actual idea of working all together in one team, from the lowest part of your infrastructure to the highest part of your application logic, that I think is something that would benefit teams wherever the location. Just be able to have an understanding, even if you have some people that are more expert than others, just having that shared understanding of that entire stack, even from capturing requirements, delving into what a BA would generally do, all the way down to platform database indexing. Just having some concepts of at least a little bit of information about that means that you're less thrown off by any ticket you'd get to get that overall performance, even if you primarily work in a certain area, because that is something you know lots about. I think that idea of building teams like that, like you're sort of saying, of stop splitting horizontally, really helps a lot.
The only drawback I found is that you end up with a team of specialists, in that you need the guy who can do this, the guy who can do that, or the gal who can do this and do that. Rather, before you had it to say you had the UI dev team. So if there was any UI dev task, they could pick it up and run with it, while suddenly you get all these different tasks coming into the team, but that only Barbara can do that particular task, which then goes against some of the kind of agile planning that we try and do and that kind of thing, because it comes more of a bit of a Gantt charty type thing. But so long as, if over time the team then develops and can upskill each other, and you end up with lots of T-shaped sort of multi-skilled developers and wider tech staff, then that's a good thing. But the initial challenge can be around there, I think.
I think there's something else as well, though, isn't there? So there's someone who worked with us, a guy called James, and he actually moved on to a company that is all not co-located, they're all working from home all the time. They've got their own office space, but I think it's once every 2 or 3 months they all get together, they all have a social event, they all have a working together day, and that's something that I think still would need to happen. So yes, people can co-locate or work from home all the time, but they still need to get together every now and then, just so they can iron things out. They can have that social aspect, they can actually talk to each other. I mean, we don't have that right now, I know we don't, and it will come eventually, but it definitely is missing right now.
Kind of leads back into what Joe was saying at the beginning about having 10 minutes before you kind of kick off your actual kind of meeting call, just to kind of get it all out your system, get friendly. There's actually something on the chat panel that says, is working from home the future? And basically, will financial savings on rent appeal to companies and freedom to work whenever you want to attract potential employees? And I think already there was an element of people trying to work from home a lot more. So I'm hoping that this whole coronavirus and all the rest of it will kind of kick off the ability that we're now all kind of prepared to do more remote working. But like we've just kind of discussed, there's going to need to be an element of kind of getting to the office. These are the people that you're kind of working with. There's a bit of a social event, so you can kind of, meet and greet, and you're not just kind of treating everyone like, drones on the other side of stuff. But potentially, I think there will be, I think that possibly.
I can certainly see it shifting so that half your time's spent working from home. But then the problem is, if half the time spent working from home, that implies you need the other half in an office. So the company's not saving any money; they still need the office space, unless they have Mondays and Tuesdays is Project A's time in this space, or full hot desking or something. Although everyone I've ever spoke to about full hot desking seems to hate it. So
all I can say, is that I hope it doesn't encourage this behaviour, because I've recently I've recently turned an office into a bedroom, and I now have no space to sit to do my work. So
apart from you though, Josh, I think most people have kind of said that they see an upshift in their kind of like personal life, because they're not now necessarily running around to do all this. It gives them a bit more time on, say they were working from home 2 days a week in the future, to be able to kind of have a bit more of a kind of, kind of doing stuff rather than constantly been flitting about with work and all your time is work. So I think from a lot of people that I've spoken to, this kind of, while coronavirus has kind of been difficult and challenging because they haven't really been prepared to work from home, they've seen a bit of an upshift in, general kind of actually have a bit more time with my family to do that.
Yeah, as long as this reopen the schools, I'm not sure it's sustainable.
Obviously, normal service has to resume, and you can all get babysitters. But I think it's certainly something that employers should kind of now that we're all kind of a bit more kind of accustomed to it. I think it's certainly something that we should kind of all be looking at, kind of making sure that our personal work-life balance is kind of kept in check. With that.
Yeah, to add to that, go on, Josh, go on. All right, to add to that as well, I think it really depends on what project you're on. So like BGSS traditionally, we're not just there to deliver tech, we're there to try and integrate with that company. We want the product to work for them and understand what they need and why they need this, so that we can do more than just deliver sort of microservices or whatever it is that we're doing. I do think a lot of that is really required still in person. So like I've worked at BGSS for 4 years maybe, or 4 or 5 years, with a year back at uni, and every project I've ever been on has been 5 days a week away from Leeds, going somewhere and spending 5 days at client site in a hotel and then coming back, and that in-person commitment to that client and being there every day to help them with whatever they're doing or to be part of that organization definitely opens doors and gets you up and running a lot more with providing not just tech, but like benefits and driving them in the right direction around, asking those questions.
And you start to notice stuff going on in their office as well, don't you? Around, how their teams work with one another and what's, even the layout of the building makes a difference to the way that they work. So it's that engagement with the client is crucial. Perhaps at least in the initial phases of a project.
I don't think I disagree with any of that, but I have been kind of working in places where, say, I'd be working in Leeds, I'd go in, and even the staff that you were working with would all be working from home 2 days a week. Yet we, as kind of BGSS, were like, okay, we're in there 5 days a week. And some days you'd go in, certainly on a Friday, and you'd be sitting looking at the other BGSS people because everybody else has kind of gone working from home on a Friday. And you're just like, who am I benefiting right now? I've been here. So I think there's an element that, yeah, I completely agree. And I wouldn't take anything away from going into the office. I agree completely with, it's better to be in there with people around you. But at the same time, I think there's an element that we've kind of just demonstrated throughout coronavirus that we can all kind of work and function without being in the office every day. But
yeah, I mean, it's taking that same approach to like technical debt or something on a project. It's that cost benefit or the value added. Like you don't pick up random tickets, or you don't let devs pick up random tickets that don't actually add any value if we're not going into that area, or we're not, there's nothing there to do. The saying goes of like locating yourself. If going into an office where no one talks to you and you sit by yourself, there's no value added, and it's costing you time, which you could be working to do more on the project, or improving your own mental well-being so that you're more able to concentrate during the day. But if you're just going there because someone's telling you to go there, it seems like we wouldn't take that attitude to anywhere else in what we do. Like, I wouldn't just write services without thinking, or write code without asking what the point of it was. I wouldn't go to an office and ask why am I coming here if there's no reason to be.
Agree, but it's something, I think it's something that kind of as a more mature developer now, then I feel more entitled to turn around to someone and say, look, there's nobody in on Friday, I'm not going to come Friday type of thing. Rather than say when I first started, if no one was in on a Friday, I was still diligently sat there, so I think the level of kind of, understanding your environment and what you're doing really.
So to answer the original question, is working from home in the future? I think we're going to see an uptick, but there's still going to be a lot of value in going and working with clients or with each other.
I'd agree with that. Josh clearly wouldn't.
Josh just wants to get out of the house.
I can't wait.
Just so he can sleep on the train.
I need a haircut.
No, you don't. It's majestic.
So circling back to something we were discussing before, Smila was asking how long in our experience did it take to get a newly formed team working well together with other teams in remote locations. So that is something we do all the time at BGSS, is here's a new team, let's get them together, let's get them working together. And sometimes it's all our guys, sometimes it's blended teams, sometimes we do resource org, which I suppose is less of an issue here. But yeah, that whole how do you bootstrap a team and get it working, especially when there's another team that's been bootstrapped halfway across the world to get them up to date. I mean,
I was going to say, yeah, the biggest input I think is how big that team is. Like a project that just goes from 0 to 50 developers or 50 anyone is going to suffer quickly and rapidly. You know, you just can't all agree on how to do things when there's 50 of you to agree. And at the beginning of a project, when those silos of work that you could create these sort of artificial divides with people, you don't know where they exist. You don't, like, it's like abstracting too early in code. You don't know where the abstractions lie yet as to what will make sense. And if you bring, you know, too many people on too quickly, you sort of compound the problem and end up causing that window of getting you all working and ticking over to be a lot longer. Whereas if you start with, you know, 2 or 3, obviously it depends on your project, but if you start with a few engineers for a little while, you know, a few weeks that understand and can start to build the structure out and separate themselves then to build teams around them, I think that, even if they're remote teams, gives you a lot more, a lot quicker chance of getting to that part of being fully performing quickly, would be my, you know,
yeah. I guess in a sense, if there's a remote team set up, there's an implication there that somebody has already made a decision about how everything's split up and how things should work, which may or may not be correct, and in my experience is usually incorrect, but it's a sort of starting point of someone's gone, oh yeah, it's roughly component A and component B, and let's develop them separately.
Depends, in my opinion, it depends on how long that other team's been kind of formed as well. If that other team's kind of fairly new formed and they're kind of open to kind of ideas and co-working with you, then it's better. But sometimes, you know, certainly speaking back to a project that, you know, at least 3 of us have been on, you get on that project and they have a very rigid idea of how something's going to be done. And it's very difficult to basically come in and go, actually, with a fresh pair of eyes, can we take this step? Can we pivot like this? And having someone turn around and go, actually, this is what we've been working on. We're not really kind of too open to change. So I think the way in which you can spin up teams really depends on kind of how much outside pressure you've got on determining your way of working anyway. So if your way of working has already been determined for you, it's like, right, you will work on this product on this service. It can be quite easy because you know you've got quite a rigid box. Whereas if it's like, right, this is all our infrastructure, but this bit is run by these people and you have to interact with that. And those people have a very defined way and quite protective over what they've already done, then it could take a while to find your roles and responsibilities as to kind of how you can interact with that. You know, validation on certain things was one of our key ones. And it was like, how do you do all this kind of validation on stuff? And it's like when somebody owns that validation and you're saying to them, well, ultimately that's not quite right. So, you know, and you know, it's interesting. So
I think, yeah, like the big thing for me is for remote teams especially, is that at least in my current project, the biggest thing I've really learned is that empathy between teams, of trying to understand that other team that you can't see that's in Bangkok has probably got 5 other managers all pressuring them right now to deliver their most important thing ever, and you're just one of those people. And you know, you've offset your pressure for those stories, whatever you're doing, because you've ticked the box and they are delivered. It's creating that window of giving, you know, give some now to take some later. You know, when the pressure's on you, you hope the fact that you woke up at 11 p.m. or got up early or whatever to support them with the handoffs and being there and available means that the second that you hit that stressor or that point in which everything is shifted and changed and you're going to need to deliver and you're going to need some resource from them, they remember that back and forth, you know, that you went out of your way. And I think the better you develop those sort of cross-team communication and give and take sort of thing, the more efficient you'll be when it matters.
Does that fit into culture though, Joe? So, I mean, you mentioned about developers in Asia, and you know, QA in Asia, they've got 5 or 6 different people, and the pressure does get built on them. Do you find that you're feeling more empathetic towards them because you're actually getting to know them more as people, as developers or QA?
It's more seeing, once you see the pressure put on yourself, you realize that because they're closer to production, the pressure on the people there is probably going to be 10 times that. And sadly, the organization I work for is too big to change that overall pressure. You know, that's just the way that they work. Or, you know, maybe there are pockets that work differently, but at least the bits I've seen work they're very delivery focused, date focused. And you sort of get that feel of empathy, being like, oh, I've been in those shoes. You know, you just know what it's like another project at DSS where someone will tell you at 10 p.m. at night, there has to be a fix going out tomorrow morning, and that's it. You're not going to go to bed. You know, that's, you know, the decision's been made, you're going to do it, and that's it. And you just know that those people's reality there and then is like that every day at the minute, because they'll be pushing these things out and trying to just get that. At least for me, it's something I always missed before, was that, well, why can't they just do it? I could do it if I was there, within 10 minutes. I know, because I know all the problem. I've got it all in my head already. You forget that they've also got 10 other teams pushing their fixes out at the same point or whatever else. Just understanding that now with more co-locators does I think help with that frustration barrier.
So how do you keep standards high in all of this though? I mean, yeah, this is the thing. Standards will start to slip in. So the definition of done can sometimes, I think, ultimately kind of define how teams communicate with each other. If you go, right, okay, if we're all having to integrate with this, or we're all having to work on this, this is what we define. You must have kind of unit tests, integration tests. You must have this in the pipeline. It must be green on Jenkins. These kind of things define really the standards and how teams kind of communicate. But still saying that, we've been on teams where you might be working with someone in a different country whose standards or their definition of done is a lot more kind of loose and fast with the term done, shall we say, which puts you in a precarious situation then, because you then have to kind of up your game to kind of make, or you're constantly battling against them. So how do we keep the definition of done high in all of this then?
Which is a challenge we often face at BGSS, because we have that culture of having everything built to the highest standard. Everything must have the green pass, all that kind of thing. And we hit organisations who aren't necessarily used to that, and they go, "Well, oh no, I've seen the code works on your box. Why are you telling me it's not ready?" But the only thing you can do is keep banging away at that mantra that the quality is key. Because if you don't get that quality, you're going to pay for it 5 times down the road, and get stats to back it up. And get some monitoring in early so you can show them where things are going wrong.
I suppose the thing as well is that if you are having to cut corners and cut around the definition of done, things are going to go wrong. But as long as you retrospectively look back at that and figure out why that's happened, you can fix forward in those situations. You've got to, haven't you? You've got to look at where it went wrong and figure out how you can make it better going forward.
The better is always kind of changing someone else's way of working. If you're sitting there going, well, our problems have been influenced because this person hasn't implemented this right. They haven't put test cases in there, and all of this kind of QA is not really been a bit kind of loose and fast with everything. Then your retro basically becomes, I've got to tell that other team again to kind of up their standards.
But sometimes it's really simple things. So I mean, I was sent out to help a team in Poland a couple of years ago, and it was as simple as finding the TV remote and drawing them out a whiteboard and that kind of thing, just to get them set up so they could actually track their tasks in a physical manner, which probably wouldn't work now because we're all remote, but and make sure that they've got the information radiators on the board, which they hadn't thought to put up there, and get all that information out to them. And that it's simple things like that which sort of can twist the way of thinking, which you sort of take for granted, and you suddenly get better performance out of them.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've got a question here saying, because we're all exclusively at home now because of the current situation, have you found it to affect time management in drastic ways, or is it the same as before?
I'll start here. I'll start by saying that I'm not working 8-hour days, and I mean, 7-week old, yes, fair enough, but I tend to be working more 10-hour days and finding an hour break here, an hour break there. I have got a nice life, personal to work balance going on right now, but your days are longer, just with more broken up bits in between, and it can be hard to get into the swing of things a lot of the time, especially for a new project where you've got to have your head in it big time, looking at everything. It has affected it massively. Just looking forward to it going back to normal now, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak for me. I just forget some days that dinner has been and gone. Like, you just get to because you've got no. So, for instance, me, I'm in New York, where no one that I know lives here. You're just by yourself. You've not got like friends saying, "Do you want to meet up?" or anything like that. You're solo by yourself. You'll get to like 5 p.m. There's no differentiation now with leaving a physical office and coming home, or going out into New York or anything like that. You just have there's no obvious time to stop. And because of that, if you're working on a ticket or something, I've just found sometimes you just look up and you're like, oh, it's 9 p.m. I've missed dinner. I need to get up and do something now. This is too much, and shut the laptop and have that break. And the first few weeks of working from home were like, it was just like, I ended up having to set alarms on my phone for like 5:30, 6 o'clock. Like, that's it. Whatever happens, that's the end. You need to walk away. Otherwise yeah, otherwise you're going to be tired tomorrow. I have really struggled with that.
Yeah.
Speaking of time management, we're nearly at the hour, guys. So
Yeah. Okay. Right. So wrapping it up then, unless there's any more questions, final chance to ask us anything. Hopefully you've kind of all been enjoying this. This, as I say, hopefully has been a first to kind of how we might try and do future podcasts in, going forward, and hopefully trying to get more people to kind of interact with them and make them a bit more kind of an external thing to BJSS. Hopefully, if this has all gone well, so if it has done, hopefully feed it back to BJSS, let them know that we're, not mad, for want of a better word.
that's an aspiration, not mad.
I was trying to choose my words very carefully there, As I say, hopefully you've all enjoyed it. Hopefully it's been fun, and you've kind of, if nothing else, you might learn something. Think anybody's learned anything from this, Josh? No?
They've learned that I've had a child 7 weeks ago, I think, yeah.
JavaScript sucks.
You're never invited. You are never invited.
You're dead to us now.
That's okay.
Yeah.
He couldn't wait for that, could he?
Couldn't
Avoid JavaScript at all costs.
What do you think of micro front ends then, Joe?
It's not. It's too public. It's too public. Micro
Right.
front end. Yeah, let's
Right.
engineer another
On that
problem we
note-
need in the front end.
On that note,
Oh,
it's
that
been
can
a
happen next
pleasure.
time.
Thank you very much for joining me, UI Podcast. Hope to see you all again in the future. It's been a pleasure. Take care.
Bye for now.